Rain over a Victorian London street, section 1. The rain begins at dusk. Tonight, we are going to walk through one quiet street in Victorian London while rain settles over the city. There is nowhere you must hurry to reach. No appointment waits at the end of the road. You may simply follow the wet pavement as it shines beneath the lamps, listening to the rain touch slate roofs, window ledges, carriage covers, and dark wool coats. The year is somewhere in the late 1880s. London has grown vast around you, spreading mile after mile beneath a sky the colour of pewter. Railways carry people beneath and above the streets. Warehouses stand beside older houses. New shops appear between courts and alleys that have been here for generations. Yet tonight, our world will be smaller than the whole city. We are on Marlow Street, a modest road not far from Holborn, though no map need concern us. At one end, the street slopes toward busier thoroughfares. At the other, it narrows between brick buildings and disappears into mist. There are shops at ground level, rooms above them, a small public house on the corner, a stationer, a bakery, an umbrella maker, a bookseller, and a respectable boarding house with lace curtains in its windows. The rain began in the late afternoon. At first it was little more than a grey veil, barely enough to darken the stone. Now, as daylight fades, it has become steady and patient. Water gathers along the curb and turns the roadway into a broad ribbon of black reflections. You stand beneath the shallow shelter of a stone arch wrapped in a warm coat. The collar is turned up against the damp air. In one hand, you carry a closed travelling bag. In the other, a plain umbrella rests with its tip against the pavement. Across the street, a lamplighter has begun his evening work. He moves from post to post with a long lighting pole, pausing beneath each glass lantern. One by one, small flames appear. At first, they look weak against the fading sky. Then the evening deepens and their amber light becomes warmer, gathering in soft circles on the wet pavement. A handsome cab passes at an easy pace. The horse lowers its head against the rain. Hooves strike the road in a hollow rhythm, followed by the hiss of narrow wheels through shallow water. The driver is only a dark shape beneath a cape and brimmed hat. Within moments, the cab has vanished into the mist at the lower end of the street. From the bakery comes the smell of warm crust and damp coal smoke. From an open doorway comes the quiet scrape of a broom. A shopkeeper pulls in a painted sign before the wind can make it swing too loudly. London is not silent, even in rain, but the weather softens its edges. Distant bells become rounder. Wheels sound farther away. Voices pass behind glass and brick, reduced to murmurs. Take a slow breath. Feel the cool air at the edge of the archway. Hear the rain falling without urgency. When you are ready, open your umbrella and step onto Marlow Street. Section 2. Gas lamps in the mist. Your umbrella opens with a quiet movement of ribs and cloth. Rain immediately begins to tap across its surface, thousands of light touches forming one continuous sound above you. The pavement is made of broad stone slabs, darker near the curb and pale beneath the lamps. Between them, fine lines of water reflect the sky. Your boots make a gentle, steady rhythm as you walk. The lamplighter is working ahead. He wears a heavy coat polished by rain at the shoulders. His long pole rises toward the next lantern, where a small metal fitting waits behind fogged glass. He turns the mechanism, brings flame to gas, and lowers the pole. The lamp brightens with a soft breath. Gaslight does not banish the darkness. It creates islands within it. Each lamp reveals a short section of pavement, a doorway, a brass plate, perhaps the lower part of a shop window. Between the lamps, the street returns to blue-grey shadow. Mist gathers lightly above the roadway. It is not the thick yellow fog of winter stories, but ordinary rain mist mixed with cold smoke and the breath of horses. It blurs the far end of Marlow Street and softens the upper stories until chimneys and rooflines seem to float. A row of brick houses rises on your left. Their facades are narrow, each with 2 windows on every floor. Curtains glow here and there. Through one window, a family is finishing tea. You see only shapes: a woman carrying a pot, a child leaning over a table, a man lifting a newspaper closer to the lamp. The glass turns the scene into a quiet picture. Then the curtain is drawn and the warm rectangle disappears. Farther along, rainwater runs from an iron gutter into a downpipe. The pipe is partly blocked, so water spills over the rim and falls in a silver cord. It strikes a stone step with a steady splash that repeats beneath the softer rain. At the next lamp, the lamplighter pauses to wipe water from his face. He looks up and gives you a brief nod. It is the small acknowledgement of 2 people sharing the same weather. Then he continues toward the corner. A woman approaches beneath a dark umbrella. She carries a parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. You both turn slightly to pass without touching. For a moment, the umbrellas overlap and the rain changes its sound. Then she is behind you, her steps fading toward the arch. Near the stationer's shop, a shallow puddle holds an almost perfect reflection of the lamp above. The real flame trembles behind glass. The reflected flame trembles in the water. When a drop strikes the puddle, rings pass through the amber image and break it into pieces. A moment later, it forms again. There is comfort in the repetition. Flame, rain, reflection. Footstep, pause, footstep. The street asks very little of you. Ahead, striped canvas awnings extend above several shop windows. Beneath them, the pavement is almost dry. You move toward that shelter, following the warm line of gas lamps deeper into the evening. Section 3. Beneath the shop awning. The awnings form a narrow, covered passage along the street. Rain strikes the canvas overhead with a lower, softer sound than it made on your umbrella. You close the umbrella and give it a small shake beside the curb, careful not to splash the shop windows. Here, Marlow Street reveals its evening routine. A grocer is arranging the last goods inside before closing. Wooden boxes of tea, sugar, biscuits, candles, soap and tinned food stand behind the glass. A pyramid of oranges adds a muted glow of colour to the dim display. The shopkeeper's assistant lifts a sack from the doorway and carries it inside. The shopkeeper follows, rubbing his hands together after touching the wet canvas. Next door, a dressmaker's window holds a fitted bodice, folded lengths of cloth and cards of ribbon. Rainwater runs down the glass in uneven lines, making the mannequin appear to shift gently, though it remains perfectly still. Behind a curtain at the rear, 2 seamstresses work beneath a bright lamp, their heads bent over pale fabric. You pass a tobacconist with painted jars and dark wooden shelves. Then a small dairy where metal cans stand near the counter. Then a watch repairer whose window is filled with clocks. The clocks do not agree precisely. One shows 7 minutes past 6. Another is closer to 10 past. A small carriage clock has stopped altogether. Their hands point in different directions, but from within the shop, comes a blended ticking, hundreds of tiny mechanical steps layered together. The watchmaker sits at a high bench, wearing a magnifying lens over one eye. He is adjusting a movement beneath the lamp. The world outside his window is rain and shadow, but his attention is fixed on a wheel smaller than a coin. Beneath the awning, you are protected from most of the weather. Only an occasional drop escapes from the edge and touches your sleeve. The air smells of wet canvas, oranges, tobacco leaf, coal smoke, and the faint sweetness of the bakery farther down. A delivery boy stands near a doorway with an empty wicker basket hooked over one arm. His work is finished, and he watches the rain as though deciding whether to run home or wait. At last, he pulls a cap lower over his hair and steps quickly into the street. His boots splash twice, then disappear around the corner. The grocer lowers a wooden blind over the lower part of his window. The dressmaker draws her curtain. One by one, the shops reduce their light. Yet one window remains fully illuminated. It belongs to the umbrella maker. Dozens of curved handles hang behind the glass, polished wood, black horn, pale cane, and one carved like the head of a small duck. Folded umbrellas stand upright in brass containers. Several open examples hang from the ceiling, their dark silk canopies forming neat circles above the shop. At the back, an elderly craftsman is repairing a damaged frame. His hands move slowly and confidently. Outside, rain continues to fall across the city. Inside, he patiently restores the very object made to keep it away. You pause at the window, listening to the canvas above and watching the craftsman work. Section 4. The Umbrella Maker's Window. The umbrella maker's shop is narrow and deep, with drawers lining one wall and bundles of ribs, stretchers, tips, and handles arranged along the other. The old craftsman looks up from his bench and notices you, standing beneath the awning. He raises a hand in greeting, then gestures toward the door. A small bell sounds when you enter. The warmth inside is immediate, but not heavy. A coal stove glows near the back, and the air carries the scents of wood polish, oiled metal, silk, damp wool, and tea. You close your umbrella carefully. Water runs from its edge onto a shallow metal tray placed beside the entrance for that purpose. The craftsman examines the umbrella without being asked. He takes the handle, opens the canopy, and turns it toward the lamp. One section of cloth pulls slightly tighter than the others. "A loose runner," he says in a quiet voice. "Nothing serious. There is no urgency in the repair. You are dry, the shop is warm, and the rain is steady enough to continue for hours." He invites you to sit on a wooden chair while he places the umbrella across his bench. His tools are small and precise. Pliers, wire, a file, needles, thread, tiny screws and narrow strips of metal lie on a folded cloth. He selects only what he needs. As he works, you look around. Some umbrellas are plain and practical, made for clerks, shopkeepers, and travelers. Others have elegant handles and fine silk covers, intended for customers who arrive in private carriages. There are stout walking umbrellas for heavy weather, and lighter parasols meant for sun rather than rain. One unfinished frame hangs open from a hook. Without its cloth, it resembles the delicate structure of a strange black flower. The craftsman explains that the rain is good for business, though too much of it keeps people from coming to collect their repairs. He has worked on Marlow Street for 32 years. He remembers when several of the neighbouring shops had different names. when the corner public house was painted green instead of brown, and when the building opposite still had a small garden behind its wall. His voice is calm, shaped by many evenings spent at the same bench. Outside, carriage wheels pass. Their sound is softened by the shop front at the rain. The gas lamp beyond the window appears as a golden blur. The repair takes only a few minutes. He tightens the loose part, tests the opening mechanism, and applies one drop of oil. The umbrella opens smoothly now, each rib reaching its place at the same time. He refuses payment for such a minor adjustment. Instead, he accepts your thanks and returns to the damaged frame, waiting beneath his lamp. At the doorway, you open the umbrella once more. The craftsman watches to ensure that it holds properly. It does. The bell gives a gentle note behind you as the door closes. You step back into the rain, carrying an umbrella that feels almost new, and the quiet memory of a warm workshop hidden behind a bright window. Section 5. Tea in a narrow parlour. Only a few doors beyond the umbrella maker, a painted board announces a small tea room. The lettering is plain, and the window displays 3 cakes beneath glass covers, a row of cups, and a pot of artificial flowers that have faded from red to dusty pink. The rain has cooled your hands and the room looks welcoming. You enter. A woman in a dark dress and white apron leads you to a small table near the window. The parlour is no wider than 2 railway compartments placed side by side. 6 tables fit within it, each covered with a clean cloth. A mirror on the far wall makes the space appear larger by reflecting lamps, chairs, and the narrow aisle. Only 2 other customers remain. A clerk sits alone with a cup and a folded evening newspaper. An older woman slowly finishes a slice of seed cake, her shopping basket resting beside her chair. You remove your coat and place it over the chair back. Rain purls along the shoulders before sinking into the dark wool. The waitress brings a pot of tea, a cup, milk, sugar, and a small plate of bread and butter. The cup is white with a narrow blue band. The teapot is heavy and slightly chipped near the lid. When you pour, steam rises in a pale cloud. The first sip is hot enough that you wait before taking another. Outside, rain moves over the window, turning Marlow Street into an impression of lamps, umbrellas, and passing wheels. The clerk's newspaper rustles. The old woman's spoon touches her saucer. Somewhere behind a curtain, dishes are being washed in a deep sink. The sounds are ordinary and evenly spaced. A wall clock marks the quarter hour with a single soft chime. You spread butter across the bread. It melts into the warm surface and gathers along the small holes. Nothing about the meal is grand, but it is exactly right for the weather. The waitress trims a lamp wick at an empty table. The flame lowers, then steadies. She checks the curtains, folds a cloth, and counts the remaining cakes. Her work is almost finished. Through the window, you watch the lamplighter disappear at the far end of the street. His route is complete. Every gas lamp now burns, and Marlow Street has taken on its full evening character. The clerk rises, leaves a coin beneath his saucer, and opens the door. Cold, damp air enters briefly. He raises his umbrella and steps away. The older woman follows a few minutes later. Soon, you are the final customer. You finish the tea slowly, allowing the warmth to spread through your hands and chest. Then you put on your coat, thank the waitress, and return to the street. Behind you, the tea room begins to close. The artificial flowers remain in the window, keeping their quiet place through the rainy night. Section 6. Horses on the wet stones. The rain has grown slightly heavier. Drops bounce from the roadway and collect along the edges of your umbrella. The street is darker now, but the gas lamps shine more clearly, each surrounded by a pale halo. A horse-drawn omnibus turns into Marlow Street from the main road. It is a large vehicle, painted in dark colours with a signboard along the side. Passengers sit within the enclosed lower compartment, their faces appearing briefly at fogged windows. A few hardy travellers occupy the covered section above, wrapped in coats and holding umbrellas at careful angles. The pair of horses moves at a measured pace. Their harness buckles glint under the lamps. Water darkens their coats and runs in narrow lines along their sides. Each hoof strikes the wet road with a firm, rounded sound. The conductor stands on the rear step, protected by a cape. He calls the next stopping place, but the rain and wheels soften his words until they become part of the street's general murmur. The omnibus stops near the corner. One passenger steps down, then another. A gentleman opens an umbrella before leaving the final step. A maid carrying a covered basket waits until the conductor helps her onto the pavement. The driver gives a quiet signal. The horses lean forward, the wheels begin to turn, and the omnibus continues uphill. After it passes, the street feels temporarily larger. A cab horse waits near the public house, sheltered beneath a nosebag, while its driver stands inside the doorway with a cup. The horse shifts one hoof, then another. Steam rises faintly from its back into the rain. You walk near enough to see the careful details of the harness: leather straps darkened by water, brass rings, buckles, and the padded collar that rests against the animal's shoulders. The horse turns its head slightly. One calm eye reflects the nearest lamp. London depends upon horses in ways that are visible everywhere. They pull cabs, omnibuses, delivery vans, brewers' drays, fire engines, and private carriages. Their movement gives the city much of its rhythm. Even when you cannot see them, you hear hooves and wheels somewhere beyond the mist. A stable boy comes from the side yard carrying a folded blanket. He speaks softly to the waiting horse and places the blanket across its back. The animal settles again. Farther down, another carriage approaches. This one is enclosed, its lamps burning on either side. It passes without stopping, leaving a long reflection that stretches over the road and disappears beneath the next gas lamp. You remain on the pavement, dry beneath the repaired umbrella, while traffic comes and goes. The horses do not hurry. The rain does not hurry. And for this evening, neither do you. Section 7. The bookseller at closing time. The bookseller's shop occupies the ground floor of an old brick building with 3 narrow windows above. A wooden sign projects over the pavement, painted with a gilded book that has faded after years of weather. Most of the shop is already dark, but one lamp remains lit near the rear. In the window, books are arranged in uneven rows. Some are new volumes with clean cloth covers and gold lettering. Others are second-hand, their leather spines worn smooth and their corners rounded by many hands. There are novels, sermons, histories, railway guides, collections of poetry, household manuals, and small books intended for children. A printed card announces that newspapers and periodicals may be ordered. Another advertises lending terms by the month. The door is not yet locked, so you enter. A brass bell gives a lower note than the umbrella maker's bell. The bookseller appears between two tall shelves, carrying a stack of volumes against his waistcoat. He tells you that he is closing, but there is no annoyance in his voice. Rainy evenings bring people to bookshops, and he is accustomed to one final visitor. The room smells of paper, leather, dust, lamp oil, and damp coats. Shelves rise nearly to the ceiling. A rolling ladder rests along one wall. Near the stove, several books have been placed upright so that moisture can leave their covers. You move slowly between the shelves. Rain taps at the window. The sound seems farther away here, absorbed by thousands of pages. You select a small volume of travel writing, not because you need to go anywhere, but because the book fits easily in your hand. Its former owner has written a name inside the cover in careful ink. The date beneath it is 20 years old. The bookseller wraps the volume in brown paper and ties it with thin string. His fingers perform the task without hesitation. Fold, turn, cross, knot. While he works, he explains that the rooms above the shop are occupied by a widow and her two daughters. On dry days, one daughter reads near the upper window. On wet days, the whole building seems to listen to the rain. He hands you the parcel. It is light, warm from the shop, and pleasantly solid beneath the paper. Then he walks with you to the door. Outside, Marlow Street shines under the gas lamp. The bookseller turns the sign from open to closed and lowers the blind halfway. You step onto the pavement, and the lock clicks behind you. For a few moments, the final lamp remains visible through the upper part of the window. Then it goes out, leaving only books in darkness, waiting patiently for morning. Section 8, A Constable's Evening Round. A police constable appears at the corner, just as the bookseller's light goes out. He walks with the steady, unhurried pace of someone who knows every doorway on his route. His dark uniform is buttoned high at the neck. Rain beads on his helmet and shoulders. A short cape protects the upper part of his coat, and a lantern hangs at his side. He pauses beneath the nearest gas lamp to look along Marlow Street. There is little for him to notice. The grocer is closed. The tea room is darkening. The cab horse waits quietly near the public house. A few pedestrians move beneath umbrellas. Water continues to run beside the curb. The constable checks the bookseller's door with one gloved hand. The lock holds. He crosses to the stationer's shop and tries that handle as well. Then he looks toward an alley between two buildings where a gate has been left partly open. You follow at a comfortable distance. Inside the alley, rain falls from a roof into a barrel. The constable pushes the gate until the latch catches. A cat slips past his boots and disappears beneath a cart. He watches it go, then returns to the pavement. At the boarding house, he exchanges a few words with the landlady, who has opened the door to collect a late newspaper. Their conversation is ordinary. The weather, a blocked gutter, and a parcel expected tomorrow. The constable tips his head and continues. His presence is not dramatic. He is not pursuing anyone through the mist. There are no whistles, alarms, or hurried footsteps. Most of a night patrol consists of walking, watching, remembering which windows are usually lit and which doors should be locked. He passes the umbrella maker's window. The old craftsman has gone home, leaving one umbrella open on the bench to dry. The constable glances through the glass, sees nothing unusual, and moves on. The rain marks his route with brief sounds. It taps against his helmet. His boots strike the slabs. The metal fitting of his lantern gives a faint click as it swings. At the far end of Marlow Street, he stops beside a public call box used by the police. He unlocks the small door, sends a routine signal, and closes it again. The action takes less than a minute. Then he turns back toward you. As you pass one another, he offers a quiet good evening. His face is calm and slightly tired. You return the greeting. He continues uphill, his dark figure moving from one pool of gaslight to the next. Each time he enters the mist between lamps, he almost disappears. Then another light finds the wet surface of his coat, and he becomes visible again. Soon the rain absorbs the sound of his steps. Section 9. The boarding house door. The boarding house stands near the middle of Marlow Street. It is taller than the neighbouring shops and narrower than it first appears, with a polished brass plate beside the door and lace curtains at every front window. This is where a room has been prepared for you. You climb 2 shallow stone steps and pull the bell. Somewhere within the house, a wire moves through passages and around small brass wheels. A bell rings in the back hallway. The door opens almost at once. The landlady is a practical woman in a dark dress, with a ring of keys at her waist and spectacles suspended from a cord. She welcomes you in before the rain can follow. The entrance hall smells of beeswax, coal fire, boiled linen, and supper. A patterned runner covers the floorboards. Umbrellas stand in a ceramic holder beneath the coat hooks. You add yours to the collection, its wet canopy folding among several others. The landlady takes your coat and hangs it where warm air from the kitchen passage may help it dry. Your travelling bag is left near the stair for a maid to carry later. A gas bracket burns on the wall. Its flame is turned low, protected by a glass shade. The light reveals framed prints, a narrow mirror, and a small table holding letters for the residents. Rain sounds different from inside the house. At the door, it had been close and immediate. Here, it is filtered through brick, glass, curtains, and carpets. You hear it mainly at the front windows and in the distant movement of water through the gutters. The landlady explains the evening arrangements. Supper will be served shortly in the dining room. Your room is on the 2nd floor facing the street. Hot water can be brought in a covered jug. Breakfast begins at 7, though there is no need to rise early. Other residents are returning. A young clerk enters, folding his umbrella with relief. An elderly gentleman follows more slowly, carrying a violin case beneath his coat. From upstairs comes the sound of a door closing and someone walking carefully along the landing. The house has its own rhythm, separate from the street but connected to it. Every ring of the bell brings in a little weather. Every opening door reveals the gas lamps, mist, and shining road for a moment before warmth closes around the visitor again. The maid appears, lifts your bag, and leads you toward the stairs. Before following, you look back through the glass panel above the door. Outside, a pedestrian passes beneath an umbrella. The gas lamp opposite is blurred by rain. Then you climb into the quiet interior of the boarding house, leaving Marlow Street on the other side of the wall, though never entirely out of hearing. Section 10. Supper by the kitchen range. The dining room is at the back of the house, beside a narrow courtyard where rain falls through darkness onto flagstones and metal buckets. A fire burns in the grate. Lamps stand on the sideboard and table, their shades casting warm circles across the room. The wallpaper is patterned with small leaves. A clock sits beneath a glass dome on the mantel, ticking with a measured sound. 5 places have been set. The young clerk sits near the window, his hair still damp from the rain. The elderly gentleman places his violin case carefully against the wall. A schoolmistress from the upper floor folds her napkin across her lap. At the far end, a commercial traveller explains that his train was delayed by wet rails outside the city. No one speaks loudly. The weather has made everyone slightly quieter than usual. Supper begins with a simple soup. Steam rises from the bowls and briefly clouds the lower part of the window. Bread is passed from hand to hand. The maid brings roast mutton, potatoes, carrots and gravy from the kitchen. Beyond the door, the range gives a steady iron warmth. Pots settle on their hooks. Coal shifts with an occasional soft crack. The cook moves between stove and work table, preparing tomorrow's stock, while tonight's meal is being served. You eat slowly. The mutton is tender, the potatoes plain and comforting, and the gravy warm enough to remove the last chill from your hands. Rain ticks against the courtyard window. From the street side of the house comes the muffled roll of a carriage. Conversation turns to ordinary things. The clerk has misplaced a glove. The schoolmistress has received new copybooks for her pupils. The violinist will play at a private gathering tomorrow. The traveller has seen flooded fields from the railway carriage. Nobody asks you for a long account of yourself. It is enough to say that you are staying one night and continuing your journey later. In a boarding house, people arrive and leave with parcels, cases, letters and stories, but not every story must be told immediately. A baked pudding follows the main course. It is served with warm custard from a white jug. The commercial traveller accepts a second helping. The schoolmistress smiles but declines. When the meal is finished, cups of tea are brought in. The violinist opens his case only long enough to check that the instrument has remained dry. The polished wood catches the lamplight, then disappears beneath green felt when the lid closes. The clock marks 8. One by one, the residents excuse themselves. The clerk has letters to write. The teacher has lessons to prepare. The traveller wishes to read before sleep. You remain for another minute beside the fire, listening to the rain in the courtyard and the quiet work continuing beyond the kitchen door. Section 11. Letters and the Evening Post. In the small residence parlour, a writing desk stands beneath a gas lamp. The desk contains sheets of cream paper, envelopes, pen holders, a bottle of ink, sealing wax, blotting paper, and a brass rack for unanswered letters. The landlady allows guests to use these things so long as they replace what they take. The young clerk is already seated there. He bends over a letter, writing quickly but neatly. Each time he reaches the end of a line, his pen makes a faint scratch against the paper. A small pile of envelopes waits beside his hand. You choose a chair near the window and unwrap the book purchased from the bookseller. The brown paper opens with a dry rustle. The thin string leaves a shallow line across the cover. Inside, the old owner's name appears again, written with the confident hand of another decade. Before you begin to read, the front bell rings. A postman stands outside beneath a waterproof cape. His leather bag is dark with rain. He gives the maid a small bundle of evening letters and receives several stamped envelopes in return. The exchange is swift and practiced. Cold air travels briefly along the hall. Then the door closes. The maid sorts the letters on the narrow table. 1 is for the schoolmistress. 2 are for the landlady. A postcard belongs to the commercial traveller. Another envelope has been redirected twice and now carries 3 different addresses in 3 different hands. The clerk finishes his letter, presses blotting paper over the final lines, and folds the sheet. He warms sealing wax above a candle, allows 1 dark red drop to fall, and presses a small stamp into it. The process feels deliberate. Words must be chosen, written, folded, carried through rain, sorted, and delivered. A message crosses the city only because many hands repeat their part of the journey. You open the travel book. It describes a summer road through southern countryside with hedges, inns, hills, and clear weather. Reading about sunlight while rain moves over the London window creates a pleasant distance. The page is quiet. The room is warm. The road in the book can wait exactly where it is whenever your attention drifts. A drop of water travels down the outside of the glass. It joins another and becomes a wider stream. The postman's steps fade along Marlow Street. Somewhere farther away, another bell rings and another door opens. Letters are passing from house to house beneath capes and umbrellas. The clerk gathers his envelopes and leaves the desk. You read another page, then another, while the gas flame gives a low, steady sound above you. Section 12. The street scene from upstairs. Your room is on the 2nd floor at the front of the boarding house. The maid has turned down the bed and placed a covered jug of hot water beside a china basin. A small coal fire burns in the grate. The wallpaper is pale, the furniture dark and solid. A bed, washstand, wardrobe, chair, and narrow table beneath the window. A candle waits beside the bed, though the room also has a gas bracket. You turn the gas lower until the light becomes soft. The curtains are still open. From here, Marlow Street looks different. At pavement level, each doorway had felt separate. From above, the street becomes one long composition of roofs, windows, lamps, and moving umbrellas. Rain passes through the gaslight in slanting silver lines. The roadway reflects every lamp twice, once in each wheel track. Water runs from awnings and gathers at the corners of the buildings. Across from you, the dressmaker's upper room remains lit. One seamstress has left, but another is finishing a line of stitches near the window. Her lamp illuminates the white cloth in her hands. After a while, she places the garment over a chair, rubs her eyes, and draws the curtain. Above the grocer, a child presses both hands to the glass and watches a cab pass. Someone calls from within the room. The child turns away, and the curtain closes. The public house on the corner sends warm light across the wet pavement whenever its door opens. You see men enter beneath dripping hats and emerge later, fastening their coats. Their voices never reach the room clearly. The rain turns them into part of the distant scene. A servant carries a covered pail across the road. A newspaper boy walks quickly beneath the shelter of the shop fronts. The constable passes again, now on the opposite side. You wash with the hot water. Steam touches the mirror and fades. Your clothes are hung near the fire, where they may dry by morning. Then you return to the window in a nightshirt and dressing gown. There is no need to close the curtains yet. The room is above the street, protected by glass and height. You may watch without being part of the weather. A drop gathers at the top of the pane, hesitates, and begins a slow journey downward. Behind it, the lamps and windows bend into golden shapes. You sit in the chair, the travel book resting unopened on your lap, and listen to London through the rain. Section 13. the last omnibus. Near 10 o'clock, a familiar sound approaches from the lower end of the street. First come the hooves, slow and regular, then the deeper roll of wheels. At last, the final omnibus of the evening emerges through the mist. From your upstairs window you see its lamps before you see the vehicle itself. They move like two small stars at the height of the horse's shoulders. The omnibus follows behind, dark and shining with rain. There are fewer passengers now. 2 sit inside the lower compartment. 1 man remains on the upper deck, beneath the cover, his coat pulled close around him. The conductor stands at the rear, one hand resting on the rail. The vehicle stops opposite the boarding house. A woman steps down carrying a carpet bag. The conductor lowers it carefully after her. She pauses beneath the lamp, looks at the brass numbers on the doors, and walks toward a house farther uphill. No one else boards. The horses wait, breathing white mist into the air. Rain gleams along their harness and dark backs. The driver bends forward slightly, protected by a broad cape. Then the conductor rings the bell. The sound is clear but not loud. The horses begin again. The omnibus moves past the boarding house and climbs toward the main road, wheels making a broad whisper through the water. For several moments, its red rear lamp remains visible. It grows smaller, passes behind the branches of a street tree, and finally disappears. The departure changes the character of Marlow Street. A public service has ended for the night. Anyone who arrives later must walk, take a cab, or wait until morning. The public house begins closing its outer shutters. A waiter carries a tray from the doorway. The stable boy leads the waiting cab horse toward the yard, its hooves leaving dark marks across the road. Windows go out one by one. The city beyond Marlow Street is still active. Trains continue to arrive, printing presses run, markets prepare for early trade, policemen walk their beats. But this particular street is withdrawing from the day. You close the curtains halfway, leaving a narrow opening through which the nearest lamp remains visible. The rain continues with the same patience it had at dusk. Section 14. The printer's night shift. Not every building on Marlow Street is preparing for sleep. Near the lower end, behind a plain brick frontage, a small printing office has begun its night work. You noticed the sign earlier without paying much attention. Now a low mechanical rhythm reaches the boarding house whenever the wind shifts. The sound is not loud enough to disturb the room. It is a distant sequence of turning, pressing, releasing, and turning again. You imagine the workshop beneath its high windows. Gas jets burn above rows of type cases. Compositors stand at sloping frames, selecting small metal letters and arranging them into lines. Their fingers move from memory, finding each compartment without hesitation. A foreman checks a proof beneath a lamp. Ink rollers pass across a form, and the press completes another sheet. The office prints notices, bills, handbills, business forms, theatre programs, and a small local paper. Tonight, perhaps, it is producing tomorrow morning's announcements, a lecture, an auction, rooms to let, a lost dog, new goods at the grocer's warehouse, and a meeting in a church hall. The words are not yet on walls or counters. They exist only in reversed metal and fresh ink. A side door opens. For a moment, warm yellow light falls across the wet yard. A young printer carries a bundle of spoiled paper outside and places it beneath cover. He stretches his shoulders, looks up at the rain, and returns inside. The door closes, but the press continues. Its rhythm joins the other sounds of the night. rain on glass, water in the downpipe, the occasional cab, the boarding house clock, and the faint settling of coal in your grate. There is something restful in knowing that work can continue without requiring anything from you. The printers arrange tomorrow while you remain in a quiet room above the street. The travel book slips lower on your lap. You mark your place with the wrapping string and set the volume on the bedside table. Behind the curtain gap, the gas lamp still burns. The press turns again and again, distant and steady, until its rhythm becomes difficult to separate from the rain. Section 15. The Baker Before Midnight. Across the street and 2 doors downhill, the bakery is beginning another part of its day. The shop closed hours ago, but the bakehouse behind it is awake. A faint amber light appears through the rear courtyard, and the warm smell of yeast and flour reaches the boarding house whenever the rain briefly eases. The baker works before most of the street rises because bread must be ready early. In the bakehouse, flour lies across a long wooden table like pale dust. Dough rests beneath cloths. Scales, tins, paddles, baskets and bowls have been arranged within easy reach. The brick oven holds heat from a coal and coke fire prepared earlier in the night. The baker turns a mass of dough onto the table and divides it with a metal scraper. Each portion is weighed, shaped, and placed in a row. His assistant dusts baskets and lines tins. Their movements are economical. They have repeated them through hundreds of nights and no longer need to discuss every task. The rain cools the courtyard beyond the open upper vent, but the bakehouse itself is warm. Condensation gathers on the panes. Sleeves are rolled above the elbows. Flour marks the men's hands and forearms. Soon the first loaves enter the oven. A long wooden peel slides beneath them. The oven door opens, revealing deep red heat. The baker places the loaves inside and closes the iron door again. Nothing in the front shop reveals this activity. Its blind is down. The display shelves are empty. The painted sign hangs motionless above the wet pavement. Yet behind the dark shop front, morning is already being prepared. You can almost imagine the future customers. A housemaid will arrive with a basket. A clerk will buy a roll on the way to work. The boarding house cook will send for fresh bread. Children will pass the window and look at sweet buns arranged behind the glass. All of that belongs to tomorrow. For now, there is only dough, oven heat, quiet labor, and rain. The scent reaches your room again, warm and faint. You move from the chair to the bed and pull the covers over your legs. The mattress settles beneath you. The coal fire gives one small click. Outside, the baker continues shaping loaves while Marlow Street sleeps around him. Section 16. A cab waiting in the rain. Sometime after midnight you wake lightly without knowing exactly why. The room remains warm. The fire has lowered to a red glow behind the grate. Rain continues against the window, softer than before, but still steady enough to fill the pauses between every other sound. Through the narrow gap in the curtains, a lamp moves along the street. You rise just enough to look out. A handsome cab has stopped beneath the gas lamp opposite the boarding house. Its 2 side lamps shine against the wet body of the vehicle. The horse stands patiently between the shafts, head lowered, rain darkening its mane. The driver waits high above, wrapped in a waterproof cape. Water runs from the brim of his hat. He has brought someone to a nearby house. though no passenger is visible now. A front door farther uphill stands open. Light reaches across the pavement, while two figures speak in the hall. Perhaps a traveller is making a late departure. Perhaps a doctor has been called and will return in the cab. The reason is not clear from your window, and it does not need to be. The horse shifts its weight. One hoof touches the road and settles again. Harness leather gives a quiet creak. The driver leans down and says something reassuring. His words are lost beneath the rain, but the horse raises its head for a moment, then relaxes. Waiting is part of the cabman's work. He waits outside theatres, railway stations, houses, hotels, offices and public buildings. He waits through fog, heat, wind and rain. Sometimes the delay is a few minutes. Sometimes it is long enough for the street around him to become completely still. Tonight, Marlow Street keeps him company with a gas lamp and the faint smell of baking bread. At last, a gentleman emerges from the open house carrying a black medical bag. He fastens his coat, crosses the pavement, and steps into the cab. The front door closes behind him. The driver gathers the reins. The horse begins with no sudden movement, only a calm lean into the harness. Wheels pass through the rainwater with a gentle hiss. The cab moves downhill and disappears beyond the stationer's shop. The gas lamp remains, illuminating the place where it waited. You return beneath the covers. The mattress is still warm. For a while, you listen for the cab on the distant main road, but the sound has already merged with the sleeping city. Section 17. The quietest hour. The quietest hour arrives without announcement. The public house is closed. The final omnibus has gone. The bookseller, dressmaker, grocer, umbrella maker, and stationer are dark. Even the printing press has paused while forms are changed and workers take tea. Rain falls more lightly now. Instead of drumming on the window, it brushes the glass. Water still travels through the gutters and drops continue to fall from awnings, but the storm has spent much of its energy. Marlow Street lies beneath a soft darkness divided by gas lamps. From your bed, the nearest flame is visible through the curtain gap. Its halo has become clearer as the mist thins. The light touches the wall opposite, the top of a closed shutter, and a section of pavement where rainwater moves along the curb. No pedestrians pass. The boarding house is still. Pipes settle within the walls. A floorboard gives a small sound as the building cools. Somewhere in an upper room, a sleeper turns over and the bed frame responds with one faint creak. The clock on the landing marks the hour, but its chime is softened by doors and carpets. You count only the final notes before they fade. There is a temptation to imagine a great city as permanently restless. Yet even London contains quiet places and quiet intervals. Thousands of rooms hold sleeping people. Shops stand behind locked doors. Horses rest in stables. Boats lie against the Thames wharves. Empty railway platforms wait beneath glass roofs. The city has not stopped. It has simply lowered its voice. You breathe slowly beneath the blankets. The air smells faintly of clean linen, coal ash, and the rain that entered earlier on coats and umbrellas. The book on the bedside table keeps its place beneath the loop of string. Your dry clothes hang near the grate, ready for morning. Nothing needs to be arranged now. Nothing must be solved. The rain has covered the street in a smooth, continuous sound. It has softened wheels, voices, bells, and footsteps until only the gentlest traces remain. Beyond the window, one drop releases from the gutter and touches the pavement. Then another follows. The quietest hour continues, spacious and unhurried. Section 18. A watchman and a stray cat. Near 3 o'clock, movement returns to the street in the smallest possible way. A cat comes out from beneath the bench beside the closed coffee stall at the corner. It is thin but not frightened, with dark fur made almost black by the rain. The animal pauses under the awning and studies the empty pavement. A night watchman approaches from the direction of the printer's yard. He is not the constable you saw earlier. This man looks after several commercial buildings, checking gates, doors, and warehouse locks. He carries a hooded lantern and a stout walking stick. His long coat reaches below the knee. The lantern light moves across the bricks before him. He tries the side door of the printer's office. It is secure. He looks through a lower window where a gas jet still burns over an empty workbench. Then he crosses to the bakery yard and exchanges a few quiet words with the assistant carrying an empty flour sack. The cat watches from beneath the awning. When the watchman notices it, he reaches into his pocket and removes a small piece of food wrapped in paper. He places it near the wall and continues without waiting. The cat remains still until his steps have passed. Then it moves forward, sniffs the offering, and begins to eat. The scene is so small that no one else appears to witness it. The windows are dark, the rain is almost a mist. Only the gas lamps, whetstones, watchman, and cat occupy the street. The watchman reaches the boarding house and glances toward the front door. He does not test it because he knows the landlady locks it carefully. Instead, he pauses beneath the lamp to adjust the hood of his lantern. For a moment, 2 lights stand together, the fixed gas flame above and the smaller carried flame below. Then he moves on. The cat finishes and sits with its paws close together, washing one damp shoulder. When another drop falls from the awning, it shifts a few inches to the left and begins again. Soon the watchman disappears around the upper corner. The street returns to quiet, but it no longer feels entirely empty. Somewhere, a man continues his round. Beneath the awning, a small animal has found food and shelter. Behind the bakery, loaves are rising. Even during the deepest night, modest acts continue beneath the rain. Section 19. Rain in the courtyard. At the rear of the boarding house, the narrow courtyard gathers the night's water. You cannot see it from the bed, but its sounds travel through the building. Rain falls from 3 roof slopes into a central drain. A downpipe empties into a covered barrel. Overflow drips from the barrel's rim onto the flagstones below. The courtyard contains ordinary household things: a washing line, 2 zinc tubs, a coal shed, a broom, several empty bottles in a crate, and a small patch of soil where mint grows during warmer months. Tonight, every surface shines. A kitchen maid enters beneath a shawl to fetch coal for the range. She carries a covered lantern in one hand and a scuttle in the other. The door remains open behind her, sending a rectangle of warm light across the wet stones. She lifts the coal shed latch, fills the scuttle, and returns quickly. Her shoes leave temporary dark marks inside the passage. The courtyard door closes. Rain continues to fall into the empty space. Above, dozens of rooftops collect water and direct it through gutters toward yards, alleys, drains, and streets. The whole city is shaped to receive weather. Chimney pots stand above slate. Flashing protects the joins. Stone sills carry water away from windows. Doorsteps rise above the pavement. Even so, rain always finds forgotten cracks and blocked channels. A bucket may be placed beneath a leak. A cloth may be tucked beside a frame. Tomorrow, someone will climb a ladder and clear leaves from a gutter. For now, the boarding house holds. The walls remain dry. The fires remain warm. The residents sleep in rooms stacked around the central stair, while the courtyard quietly accepts the water. The drain makes a low, continuous murmur. It is not unlike the sound of a small stream moving beneath stones. The city has created its own temporary waterways running from roof to pipe, pipe to yard, yard to sewer, and onward beneath streets toward the river. You listen without opening your eyes. The courtyard is close enough to be part of the house and distant enough to require nothing from you. Its water will continue moving while you rest. Section 20. The first delivery carts. Before dawn, the first delivery cart enters Marlow Street. You hear it while the room is still dark. A slow horse, broad wheels, and the occasional muted clink of glass bottles separated by wooden dividers. The vehicle belongs to a dairy. It stops outside the boarding house. A man in a heavy apron climbs down and carries 2 metal cans toward the side entrance. The cook is already awake. She receives the milk, measures what is needed, and returns an empty container from the previous day. Their conversation is brief and low. The horse waits beneath the fading rain. Its breath is pale in the cool air. The driver gives it a small piece of carrot before climbing back onto the seat. The cart continues to the next house. Soon another arrives from the wholesale market, carrying vegetables beneath a canvas cover. A basket of cabbages, carrots, onions, and turnips is delivered to the grocer's rear door. The assistant appears with his hair uncombed and his sleeves rolled, yawning as he signs for the goods. The bakery opens its yard gate. Trays of fresh loaves are moved toward the front shop. Warm bread scent rises through the wet air more strongly than before. Marlow Street is still mostly asleep, but its morning systems are beginning. A newspaper van stops near the stationer. Bundles tied with cord are placed beneath the awning, protected from the rain. A boy arrives moments later to sort them for delivery. The sounds remain gentle because the weather encourages care. Wheels avoid the deepest water. Doors are held rather than allowed to slam. Parcels are placed beneath shelter. From the upper window, you see the gas lamps still burning. Their amber light now competes with the faintest grey in the eastern sky. The rain has weakened to occasional drops. A milk cart turns the corner. A baker's boy carries a covered basket. The constable completes another circuit and speaks briefly with the newspaper boy. The night is ending through work rather than ceremony. You remain beneath the covers, warm and unhurried, while breakfast begins to assemble itself below. Section 21. Morning behind the curtains. The first true daylight enters around the edges of the curtains. It is a pale London morning, softened by cloud. The room slowly changes from shadow to grey, revealing the wardrobe, chair, washstand, and folded clothes without the help of gas or candle. The fire is almost out. Only a few red points remain beneath the ash. You rise and draw the curtains open. Marlow Street looks newly washed. The rain has stopped, though drops continue to fall from gutters and window ledges. Puddles fill shallow places in the road. The sky is low and silver, reflected in every wet surface. The gas lamps are being extinguished. The lamplighter returns along the same route he followed at dusk. At each post he raises his pole, turns the fitting, and removes the flame. One golden circle disappears, then another. Daylight takes responsibility with the street. The grocer's assistant lifts the blind. The stationer opens his door and carries in the newspaper bundles. The bakery window fills with fresh loaves, rolls, and buns. Steam touches the glass from within. A housemaid scrubs a doorstep with a brush and pail. A clerk walks quickly beneath a dry umbrella carried like a cane. Children in coats pass with books strapped together. A cab moves uphill, its horse stepping around the largest puddle. Across from the boarding house, the dressmaker opens the upper curtain. The seamstress from last night returns to the window, now holding the finished white garment. In daylight, its details are clearer. Small buttons, careful seams, and a narrow lace edge. The cat from the awning crosses the street and sits outside the bakery door. Inside your room, the maid has left a fresh jug of hot water. You wash, dress, and fasten the dry coat that was damp only hours ago. The travel book fits into your bag. The wrapping paper has been folded and kept. The string remains around the place where you stopped reading. A bell sounds downstairs for breakfast. Before leaving the room, you look once more at the street. It is the same Marlow Street you entered beneath rain, yet morning has rearranged every detail. Darkness has become clouded light. Closed shutters have opened. Sleeping rooms have become kitchens, workshops, and shops. Only the wet stones preserve the memory of the night. Section 22. Daybreak on Marlow Street. After breakfast, you return to the entrance hall with your travelling bag. The umbrella stand is crowded with canes and damp umbrellas, but yours is easy to recognize by its smooth, repaired movement. You take it, though the rain has ended. The landlady returns your coat and wishes you a pleasant journey. The maid opens the front door. Cool morning air enters the hall. You step onto the stone threshold. Marlow Street is fully awake now, but not yet busy. The grocer arranges oranges in the window. The umbrella maker unlocks his shop and sees you across the road. He lifts one hand. You raise the repaired umbrella slightly in reply. The tea room waitress places the artificial flowers back in the window. The bookseller turns his sign to open and carries a stack of volumes toward the display. The watchmaker checks the clocks, correcting one by 2 minutes and winding another that stopped during the night. At the bakery, the first customers are arriving. A child leaves with a warm bun wrapped in paper. The cat watches from beneath the bench, hopeful but patient. The roadway remains glossy. Wheels draw dark lines through the shallow water. Roofs release their final drops. In the distance, the city rises through cloud, chimneys, domes, warehouse roofs, railway smoke, and the thin structures of bridges beyond the street. You begin walking toward the lower end of Marlow Street. Without rain striking the umbrella, other sounds become clearer. Shop bells ring. Brooms move across thresholds. Horses breathe. Newspapers rustle. A delivery man calls softly to his assistant. Somewhere, a church clock marks the hour. Yet the rain has not entirely disappeared. It remains in the gutters, puddles, shining bricks, darkened wood, and clean, cool air. It remains in the memory of gas lamps reflected on the road and the gentle sound against the boarding house window. At the stone arch where the journey began, you pause and look back. The street appears ordinary. It is one road among thousands in Victorian London, filled with people who work, wait, repair, deliver, cook, read, write, and sleep. but you have watched it through an entire rainy night. You know the warmth behind its windows, the bread prepared before dawn, the constable's measured steps, the quiet cab, the printer's distant press, and the final gas lamps fading into morning. There is no need to hold every detail. You may let the street recede into mist and memory. Take one slow breath in, then let it leave gently. The rain has passed over Marlow Street. Morning has arrived, and your walk is complete.